It's the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. I'm Marinaro. After 6 wins in a row in 2 different competitions, back down to earth for CF Montreal, losing 3-0 in Cincinnati. Some will say maybe back down to reality. That's maybe a little bit of a stretch. We're going to tackle that. Jonathan Sirois, after 4 clean sheets, gives up 3 once again last night in Houston. Couple players didn't make the trip. Were they resting them? Because, of course, they have many games ahead. And how do you tackle all those games to come in a short period of time? This is why it's very useful and very handy and very convenient to talk with a former player and former coach this morning. The MLS salaries came out a couple of days ago. CF Montreal are where we thought they would be, dead last in a league of 29 teams in terms of dollars spent. Mind you, they beat one team twice in a week that is the number 1 team as far as spending money is concerned, who spend the most amount of money, and that would be Toronto FC. But can they keep this up? Can they maintain? A new expansion team set to be announced in the MLS. It looks like it's San Diego, and it looks like it's anywhere between $450 to $500 million. Does this mean that CF Montreal has to bring in a star at some point if they want to keep up and with the Joneses? And if so, is that guy a Belgian who has ties to the assistant coach, to the sporting director? Oh, yeah. There's a report out of a newspaper, not just any newspaper. Is a star coming to CF Montreal? Really? We'll discuss that and a lot more with John Limniatis, formerly of the Montreal Impact. He's coming up right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. CF Montreal Talk.
Here's the chance. They've got the goal. Absolutely incredible. Cameron Porter delivers the goal to send Montreal Impact into the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final.
The sickest CF Montreal podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we're back, and we are live on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. It's absolutely free. And follow us on Twitter at SickPod, CFMTL. You can also watch us live on Twitter. I bring in John Limniatis. John, what's going on?
Good morning. Good. How are you, Tony?
Doing extremely well. There he is. And my buddy Agnello back at Master Control told me, John's probably on a golf course somewhere. And I said, what, are you kidding me or what? John is hard at work. Look at him. Look at the eye. He's there. He's hard at work.
Look, I'm at the office.
Yes.
Working hard for our kids.
That I have no doubt in my mind.
And I don't like golf.
John, let's foot golf. You like foot golf? Not that much. All right. Okay. John, let's jump right into it. All right. Let's bring up the starting lineup last night. And there you have it. Put on my glasses because old age is kicking in. All right, let's do that. All right. Sirois was your goalkeeper. A back line of 3 with Campbell in between Waterman to his left and Corbo on his right. Herrera playing right wing back. Lassiter playing left wing back. Camacho as a 6. And we've seen this on a couple of occasions now. I think it's the second time this season. We saw it last season as well. A position normally occupied by the likes of the Victor Wanyama's and the Samuel Piet's of this world. Choinière, who played more like an 8 last night. And Rhea and Duke in behind Chinoso Ofor. Your first impressions of last night's starting 11?
Certainly not the strongest lineup that we should have on the field. I mean, of course, Kyoto is missing, and you know more than me what his situation is. I don't know why Wanyama didn't start. Again, I don't know what the coach is thinking. That's his business. I don't know the insights of what's going on. But seeing Camacho playing the midfield, obviously, to me, was the biggest surprise, and something that we cannot have. I don't think it works. He's certainly a much better player playing the back because he's more used to it. It didn't work last night. It didn't work with him playing in the midfield, even though it wasn't just him. There's everybody else, of course, that didn't do well. And it didn't work either when he played in the back. So it was a game that, like you said correctly, it mirrored more the first 6-7 games of the season rather the last 4 or 5. And it's a lineup for me that you will not win too many games with this lineup.
John, is it? And of course, they wanted to win last night. But you, someone who coached before, is it possible when you take a look at your schedule and you say, all right, okay, we just had a couple of games. You played Toronto in the Canadian Championship. You played Toronto in the league. Last night, you're in Cincinnati. On Saturday, you're going to be playing in Jersey versus the Red Bulls. Then you're going to come back home and you're going to play Forge in the Canadian Championship. Then a couple of days later, you're hosting Inter Miami. Then a couple of days after that, you're at DC. And then a couple of days after that, you're at Philadelphia. Is it possible a coach just looks at the schedule, and he's not going to tell this to his players, but he's resigned to the inevitable, which is going to be, chances are I'm going to lose this game. So let me rest some of my players. Let me put a lineup on the field that's not a great lineup. And if we lose, we lose. I mean, I'm expecting it anyway, but let me just try and plan ahead. Or were you of the mentality of, I'll worry about tonight's game tonight, and I'll worry about the next game next game?
I think it's a bit of both, Tony. That would be me. I think it's a bit both. I think it's a huge error, and it's not responsible to go into a game thinking that you're not going to win and don't put a lineup that you think it's going to win. I think that's ridiculous. At the same time, yes, you may be thinking of the next game and the scenarios that can happen in the first game for the second game. So going into a game saying I'm going to rest somebody so that I can win the next game, I don't think that's correct. At the same time, yes, they play a lot of games, and you have to manage the time of players like Wanyama and some others.
If I can, that's why he didn't start yesterday, because he came in at the 45-minute mark. If we can bring up the substitutions so we can have more context here. Look, Wanyama came in for Campbell, all right? And at that point, Camacho drops into his position and Wanyama takes Camacho's. Ibrahim replaces Ofor up top and Lapalainen in for Duke, all right? So, obviously, in Wanyama's case, an older player, older legs, they're managing minutes. Now, if you take a look at the other player who plays in the CDM role, because you somewhat questioned Camacho as a 6, and I understand, Wanyama, they're managing his minutes, older legs. Samuel Piet is hurt. Saliba and Iliadis are 2 young, unproven players in this league, and they're probably thinking Camacho's experience, albeit at his second position, will give us more than young players. And you probably want to advance Choinière a little bit higher up the pitch. Did they have much of a choice?
No, I think that logic is fine. The issue is that, and it goes throughout, is that if you want to be a competitive team that's going to win in this league and able to do things in the other competition, you shouldn't be at this point. You shouldn't be having to really think about all these players you're going to use and how you're going to rotate them. If you want to win both, you should have players that are very capable, that you can trust to put in at no matter what happens, and enough of those players to be able to compete in both. It's ridiculous as a coach, in my opinion, or as a club, to say, you know what, it doesn't matter this game, it doesn't matter this competition. I think all competitions matter, and they need to have, if Montreal really wants to move forward and be a really competitive team and try to win things, they need more players that are capable of playing in a rotation that are almost as equal as the ones that would be their best 11. That's the only way, in my opinion, that you can really succeed in multiple competitions. And they don't have that now.
John, no, you're right. They don't have that, because for that to happen, John, you cannot have several players on kind of like league minimum, kind of like entry level. You need to have players that have made their bones, more established, have played in big games in other leagues elsewhere. And a couple of days ago, of course, the MLS salaries were divulged. And let's take a look. Tom Bogart of The Athletic tweeted out the top 5 salary spending teams in MLS. Toronto FC at $25.7 million, the Galaxy at $23.5, Atlanta United at $21.3, DC United at $20 million, and Austin at $19.9. By the way, there's a terrific story in all of this. I think I read somewhere that LAFC is like 10th or something like that, and out of 29 teams, or 11th. And they're the team that won the championship last year, and they look like the best team in the MLS, arguably, this year. Bottom 5, Real Salt Lake spends 12.2, Orlando City 11.23, the New York Red Bulls 11.2, St. Louis 10.9, and out of all the teams, the team that spends the least in the entire MLS is CF Montreal at 10.5 million. And that doesn't mean it's even 10.5 out of pocket, because there's even GAM money that you can put towards that. So if you want, and you say, I have $2 million of GAM money, I want to put 8.5 out of my pocket, and the $2 million of GAM money, you can use it that way, or the GAM money can carry over. Anyway, long story short, John, what you just said, in an ideal world, you want your bench players to not be the equal of the starters, because that's probably not reality, but to maybe be able to give, 85% of what they can give. You want more quality off the bench. You want more depth. They're at the league minimum. They're at the league bottom, John.
Yeah, it's we all know that the money will get you players that are better quality. That doesn't mean it's your answer completely. If you spend a lot of money, that means you're going to win. That's not necessarily true. But at the moment, they certainly need to spend more money and spend their money a little bit wiser. At the same time, in order for you to get good players, you need to spend money. It's just how it is everywhere in the world. If you want to be a team that's really going to chase the championship or chase to do well in the cups in other competitions. At the moment, that's not the case with Montreal. Maybe they think that the team that they presently have has that ability, which I think that's not the case. And right now with Montreal, it's not so much also players coming off the bench, but the starting lineup enough to be able to bring them far, get into the playoffs and bring them far into the playoffs. Because, you're talking about Kyoto being healthy. That's very good. Piet coming in. That's very good. That's the guys that are missing, per se. So what really else is there to make it the best possible lineup as an 11? I think as an 11, they'll be competitive, but I don't think they're going to go that far, even if they have everybody healthy.
All right, so why don't we do this? Let's dive back into the game for a second, and we'll get back to MLS spending in a couple of minutes from now, or maybe a little bit later on during the podcast, and the possibility of a star name coming to Montreal. We know that one was linked out of a very reputable newspaper yesterday, and got a little bit of a buzz in Montreal. That's coming up, of course. In the meantime, let's go to the game. 2 minutes in, and there's a free kick, and there's Joel Waterman who tries to get a foot on it. You would think to stop it or maybe to try and boot it out. Unfortunately, it redirects off of his foot and into the net. John, this happens, right?
No, of course it happens. And certainly, when you give up a free kick, the ball goes to the box at the beginning of the game. Cincinnati is doing very well this year. It's unfortunate. The first part was unfortunate because obviously it rebounded, or not rebounded. He tried to clear it, but obviously it was off balance and ended up being in the net. The first thought, I didn't think it was an own goal. I think Cincinnati scored, but then obviously when I saw the replay, so they were off balance. It happens. It's early in the game. It's too bad. But the rest of the time, we didn't do much better.
All right, okay. After that, it's Campbell who tries to find, I believe it's Rhea with a pass, but this one, Cincinnati saw it coming from a mile away. Basically, they anticipated the pass, they intercepted the pass, and then they broke in. And Acosta, I mean, John, if we talked about the first goal as things that happen, that can't happen on the second goal. I mean, Acosta split through two center backs like they weren't even there.
Yeah, I think they didn't tackle hard enough. That's for sure. Maybe they were afraid of following him, but there were multiple errors in every goal. There are multiple errors or some errors made by the defensive team. That's for sure. In that goal with Campbell, I mean, it was a soft pass. The ball should have been harder. Rhea should have looked behind and taken information earlier, as we tell all the young players to do. Maybe to go to the ball and protect it, at least not lose possession. There were errors that were made, and it was a combination of Cincinnati pressing. I think they did very well pressing Montreal in their own half, and they took advantage of this pressing because Montreal made errors in their technique. If it was their control of the ball or the passes that they made, they lost possession at very difficult places on the field, which you automatically become exposed if you lose the ball there. And Cincinnati did a very good job, not only pressing, but exploiting the lanes or the road towards the goal. They went quickly to goal, and it didn't give enough time for Montreal to recover and restructure to be able to defend properly.
All right, okay. Hernan Losada said at the end of the game that he thought that his team got back to some of their bad habits, which was giving away the ball, giving goals to the other team. We just talked about it happening on the second goal. Let's talk about it happening on the third goal as well. Matthew Choinière is thinking about himself in that moment and not thinking about the team or the best play for the team, which, John, by the way, this is very rare because the player has done everything that's been asked of him this year and then some. Been their best player, I would say, up until this point. But that was a play that if he can take it back, I'm sure he'd like to.
Oh, absolutely. I think he tried to make a pass that really wasn't. He was under pressure. If I remember correctly, he was put under pressure. He tried to play a ball through the middle. It deflected, if I'm not mistaken, off Acosta, and it went straight to Vasquez, who went right through the two center backs. That's the goal we're talking about, correct?
Yes. No, hold on a second. No, 1 second, please. The second goal was the Campbell giveaway. Okay.
Yes.
It's intercepted, right? And then Acosta splits the two center backs, all right? The third goal is Choinière in his own half.
Yes.
Tries to make a move. It's intercepted. It bounces. It goes straight to Vasquez. There's a
bounced
pass
off Acosta.
Yes, and there's a pass that's made to Vasquez. And I'm trying to remember, but I believe it was Nwobodo who made the pass to Vasquez, and he was able to drill it past along the ground past Roy.
Yeah, the issue with that is that, again, when you're attacking and you lose possession, you're bigger and open. Yes? So your two center backs or your three center backs are split. In other words, they have a space between them so that you'll be able to move the ball quickly or change sides. So what happens is if you lose possession at that moment, your center backs are already wide and they don't have enough time to recover if that's exactly what happens. Because don't forget that Cincinnati took advantage of this. They played the ball very quickly to Vasquez, who was already in the middle and able to get through. The problem is that, and you used that word before, is anticipation. If I'm the further center back, what I'm doing now is I'm assessing the situation with Choinière and saying, is it possible that he might lose possession? So because it's possible that you lose possession, I already start to tuck in. And if he doesn't lose possession, I'm still good enough and still able to get back out again to open. So the anticipation there wasn't enough. They didn't anticipate that there's a possibility that they will lose possession, because to me, it looked like a possibility to lose possession. So the six, in this case, Wanyama, in the second half, and I don't know if it was Waterman on the other side, whoever it was, they should have started tucking in already or getting back just in case we lose the ball. And that's what makes the difference between a regular player and a regular team and the one that wins championships and the players that play for Real Madrid and so on and so forth. So they didn't anticipate well, they didn't react well. And at the same time, Cincinnati reacted very, very quickly. In soccer terms, it's called a quick attack. So in other words, they won the ball very high. They transitioned quickly to goal, which in return finds the opponent spread out and open, and you take advantage of the spaces that are available to you.
John, before you talked about fielding your best team, giving yourself the best chance, putting guys in their chairs that they're most comfortable in, I think we kind of alluded to all that. So I'll come back and I'll ask you this then. We know that they absolutely want to play a 3-4-1-2 or a 3-4-2-1. It looks like the 3-4-2-1 is their formation of preference.
Yeah.
Okay. The sporting director, Olivier Renard, has discussed it. He told us on several occasions that he finds that Camacho is better in a back line of three. Waterman is better in a back line of three. To name a few, he talked about those players. In Lassiter, they believe they have a left wing back. In Herrera, they like him at right wing back. And in the number 10 position, they have Bryce Duke, they have Sean Rea, they have Matko Miljevic. And so they like to start those. And ideally, they have Kyoto alone up top if he's healthy. And if he's, and sometimes they have Kyoto with Chinoso Ofer next to him, and they end up playing with 110. Based on the personnel that they have, would you stick to one formation, which they've pretty much stuck to? It's either, once again, a 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-1-2 this year and all of last year, or would you go with another formation instead of that one? Or would you go with multiple formations and change it up? What's your philosophy behind this?
I can tell you my personal philosophy, but what they think is obviously they've chosen a formation that they like, that they want to play in. So now you have to go get the players that can play in that formation, okay? Because there's two ways of doing things as a coach. One is you get the best players possible, the best players that you can, and you try to put a system that fits these players. Or you have your own system, your own philosophy, and you try to get the players that fit into this philosophy. So if they want to go this way, that's, to me, when you say numbers, when you say...
John, if I could just add, please, if you don't mind, if I could just add, this is something that Olivier Renard has told us that is the way that he wants his team to play. And he said that they gave teams a lot of trouble last year. And he was actually received a lot of compliments by the way they play, that they're a tough out. Okay. So he said that based on the players he had and based on the players that he went and got out, he believes that this is the way they should play with this formation with a back line of three. So once again, either 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-1-2, but this is a philosophy coming from Olivier Renard, which is somewhat imposed formation on the coaches, or not imposed. That's a strong word. Maybe highly suggested or recommended.
Yeah, that's how they want to play. Yeah, they would like to stick to this. There's no problem with that. The problem is that the players that he has maybe fit in those positions, but are they good enough to be able to execute better and win games? That's the other problem. So there's a combination of things. There's your philosophy. There's the players you have in order to be able to execute this philosophy. And to me, as a whole, how much talent really does Montreal have in order to be very, very competitive in this league, no matter what system they play? So if they choose to play this system, you still have to have able players to be good enough to execute what you want. I'm not a believer. I'm a believer as a system being the base. After how you animate the system could be different in games. So maybe that's the adjustments you make. You might play 3-2-1, whatever. You might play 3-2. That's the adjustments you might make in the game. That's what I personally like. I like a team that adjusts to what goes on for the better of the game at the moment, and for what we want to do. Not necessarily change the system, but animate the system a little bit different. So if they want to play with three in the back, no problem. But you still have to make adjustments in the animation of how you do things. And I think that's probably the issue, because the players that they have at the moment, the back line, take the back line, okay? They're all decent players. I think they're decent players.
Yeah.
Right? I think they're, but they're not more than that. They're not more than that. The reality is they're not more than that. They're decent players in the MLS that can play in the back, that we have to understand that there will be games that we will take 3 goals, and there'll be games that we won't.
It's not a league, John, either, where a lot of teams invest a lot of money in salaries on back lines either, right? They usually do it with a 9, a 10, and then after that, maybe wingers. Yeah. But the back line is usually the line where you invest the least.
Yeah, of course, and it shouldn't be this way, in my opinion. But I do understand that they want the entertainment to be higher, because obviously in the United States, the entertainment and the way they see games, the way they find soccer boring, there's not that many goals. That's not the way I think of it, but that's how they think of it. But you cannot win games if you're not strong defensively, which means that the stronger you are defensively, the more you'll have the ball, because you're doing a good job defensively. So the more attack you will do. That's what a lot of people don't understand. They say, I want attacking players. Yeah, but they have to defend in order to get the ball so that you can attack.
I hear you.
If you don't defend very well, you don't have the ball that much, and you can't attack, and you're not, if you don't have top players. Certainly getting Duke, I think, is a very good idea. I like the player. I think he's a young, good player, but they still need, I think, a number 10. And I give you an example. I don't remember his name. The number 5 that was playing yesterday, for Cincinnati, the center midfielder. He was playing as a 6, but he wore number 5 in his back. He was the number 6. I found him fantastic in the sense that he covered a lot of ground. He had a lot of volume. He played good balls. He defended very well. That's another thing that we're lacking, is a player that has a lot of volume in the midfield that can defend and help the attack. Wanyama is that kind. Piet is that kind. But they don't have as much volume as that player did, and how much he affected the game. Because I don't think Piet and Wanyama certainly affect the game offensively enough, and these players seem to be able to do it.
I think you're talking about Obina and Obodo.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. John, first game of the season, James Pantemis gets hurt in Florida versus Inter Miami. Sirois comes in. Pantemis is out for a long period of time with a shoulder injury. A lot of CF Montreal fans are saying to themselves, okay, we need to go out and we need to get a keeper, because they don't know nothing much about Jonathan Sirois other than he was with Valor FC in the Canadian Premier League for the last couple of seasons, but it had a lot of people worried. He came in, he proved himself. He showed that, you know what, he belongs in this league, and not so fast on the conversation of CF Montreal needs to go out and get another keeper. He had different plans. Good for him. 6 wins in a row, 4 clean sheets. James is ready to come back, but now last night, Sirois gives up 3. Where do you stand? It was a goalie battle last year with Breza and Pantemis, which saw Breza in pole position for most of the season, and then saw Pantemis take that spot away from him late in the season and in the playoffs. Clearly, we're not going to have a problem finding games here because they're playing 2 games a week for the next month or whatever it is. But in terms of games or importance, does James re-become your number 1? Are they both 1As right now? Is there an A? Is there a B? Where do you stand?
It's such a difficult thing because the goalkeeper position is obviously very particular. When you have a lot of games, the goalies don't physically get tired, but they get mentally tired. So there is times that you may need to change them. They, as far as I know, and you follow a lot, they declare it per se as James the number 1 goalkeeper. They said this is their future.
Yes.
This is where they're going to go to. So to me, when he's ready, he has to come back in. Certainly, if they won every single game, and Sirois has been fine. There hasn't been a problem with Sirois when they won games, when they lost games, because he's not the only one that's playing. Obviously, it counts for everybody. But if they think that James is the future of the goalkeeper in Montreal, they have to put him back when he's ready to go. And I understand the difficulty because Sirois has done well, but he's done well with the team not doing well and the team doing well. So for me, I would assume that they will put James Pantemis back in the goal and play the majority of the games once he's completely 100%. And now you know that you have an adequate backup that you can use in games without having really to worry about how he's going to perform. So they're in a pretty good situation, but at the same time, I understand it's difficult.
It's an interesting comment that you made, but based on their respective ages, and Pantemis 26, and that's not old by any means, by the way, especially Sirois 21, that would maybe make you believe, if you take a look at their age, that Jonathan Sirois is the goalkeeper of the future for CF Montreal. But that doesn't mean that he has to get the starts now. So let me put it another way, all right? They're at New York versus the Red Bulls on Saturday. Then they host Forge FC on the Wednesday. And then they host Inter Miami again in league play on the Saturday. So basically, in a week, you kind of have like 3 games: Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. Based on what you just told me, would your plan be James on Saturday, Sirois in the Canadian Championship game versus Forge, and then James again in MLS action?
No,
on the Saturday.
I would probably go Sirois playing in New York, James coming in to play against the Fury, and then him playing
the Forge FC.
Sorry, the Forge FC, and then playing the following Saturday, would you say, against Miami or Orlando?
When they host Inter Miami.
Yes. So I would go with Sirois this weekend and start James as of the following game against the Forge and move on from there.
All right. So you wouldn't be worried about playing 2 goalkeepers in a short amount of time. And I know players do it all the time, by the way. Yeah. So I guess you wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, sure. But sometimes you have no choice but to play because there's a lot of games that come in at the same time. And now you have a very good idea on what Sirois can bring you. So for me, you have to make sure that James is completely 100%. I don't know if he's going to be completely 100% for New York, but if he is, you play him against.
You would think so. He played with the reserves a week ago.
Yeah,
on the weekend, right? On the weekend.
That doesn't mean he's completely ready to go. And like I said, I would give him a little bit more time. I would put Sirois against New York, and then put James against the Forge, and then play on from there.
All right, okay. We talked about the MLS salaries coming out a couple of days ago. CF Montreal is the team that spends the least. Today, a 30th franchise in the MLS has been announced. It's San Diego. the most recent expansion team. There's talk of an expansion fee of anywhere between 450 to 500 million US. We recall that when CF Montreal came in 2012 season, but in 2011 when it was announced, I believe they came in at $40 million. That's incredible growth. Toronto had come in a couple of years before that. They came in at only $10 million. John, $450 to $500 million for an MLS expansion team. Are you worried that this league is growing too big, too fast for a market like Montreal?
I'm worried altogether because it's clearly MLS has been the best league as far as business-wise is concerned that we've ever had. Okay, but the problem is from a soccer perspective, certainly the quality, in my opinion, has dropped in the MLS. Because the more teams you have, the more players you need. And in some cases, you watch games.
It's diluted.
Yeah, it's diluted, and it's going to continue to be diluted if they keep on adding teams. I don't know. Traditionally, there's not a league in the world that has 30 teams. Tops are 20, which is in England, and I think in Italy they have 20 teams, which is already a lot, in my opinion. But now having 30, but that's the North American way. In every league, in football, in hockey, they have whatever 30 teams or whatever the case may be. I don't think it's the case for soccer. They know better. I mean, they're business people. They know better. But me, what worries me is diluting the product. And if Montreal doesn't invest more money, they will be falling further behind if that's the case. But $450 million for a franchise in the MLS, to me, sounds a bit excessive.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I said this earlier this morning on BPM Sports Radio. Look, by all means, I've never thought that the ownership group in Montreal will sell to someone else in Montreal. Like, I've never thought that. As long as CF Montreal are in the MLS in Montreal here, they're not selling to anybody. It's just not going to happen. However, let me speak for myself, okay? Let me speak for myself. If this league continues to grow this much, teams are spending this much to come in. Teams are spending a ton of money on stadiums. Teams are spending a ton of money on facilities. And at one point, they're going to have to spend a ton of money on salaries if they want to be able to keep up and deliver. At that point, if there's a team that's dying to get in, a city that's dying to get in, and they can't get in because expansion has been officially closed, and let's just say it's 32 teams or 34 teams or max 36, at that point, your value of your organization will never be higher. You know, you might have someone who might, you might have a city and ownership group that's willing to spend $1 billion to buy your club and relocate it if they can't get in anymore. So
look,
I'm worried it's growing too big, too fast.
Yeah, but I agree with the fact that I can't imagine another owner owning the team other than the Saputos. I mean, I can't imagine that either. It may have to come to that, maybe, but
not in Montreal. Not in Montreal.
Yeah, I don't think it is, but maybe they can go to a way of having a partnership with another company that they can both do together and invest more money into it. Maybe that's the case. I think that's more likely than them not being the owners. But at one point or another, they have to make decisions, right? All the time, everybody has to make decisions.
Yeah.
If you want to be a very competitive team, and if you really want to win the championship and do things, you need more than what you have today. If they think that it's okay the way it is, and our chances may be that we do better, that's okay too, if that's what they want. But the problem is that at one point or another, people might get tired a little bit of seeing mediocrity year after year after year after year, and you may suffer as far as the attendance and all that stuff is concerned.
Now, spending money doesn't necessarily mean success. Take a look at what's happening with Toronto. They spend more money than anybody, and they're not a very good team. And Montreal, who spends the least, beat them twice in a week. But usually the teams that spend a little bit more on very important players like 9s and like 10s are the teams that end up having the most success. All right, now in ending, speaking of this, if you want to keep up with the Joneses, maybe you have to go out and get a star. Here's an article from Marca out of Madrid, Madrid's #1 newspaper. Montreal, I'm going to try and do this. I should have got Google Translate, damn me. Montreal llama a Hazard, pero el belga insiste en cumplir el contrato con el Real Madrid. Montreal calls Hazard, but the Belgium insists on respecting his contract and staying on his contract with Real Madrid. He's got 1 year left on his contract. He's a 32-year-old winger who won't be running back all that much anymore. He hasn't for the last year and a half. He could probably play as a second forward. He could play as a 10, but once again, you're not going to get a lot of movement on the field. He's not in his best physical condition either. Mind you, he could come to the MLS and he probably wouldn't have to be, and he'd probably be absolutely fantastic. But he's got a year left on his contract that pays him about 14 million euros a year. But we also know
he wants to honor it, probably.
Yeah, of course. Call him stupid. But we also know this, John. He's a former teammate of Laurent Simons with the Belgian national team, of which he's no longer is with the Belgian national team. Hazard isn't. No, obviously, neither is Simons, who's the assistant coach of CF Montreal, for those who are wondering. He has a relationship with Olivier Renard. They know each other as well. About 3 years ago, he was in attendance at a game that CF Montreal was playing. He went to see Olivier Renard, I believe, in a loge, went to see the team after the game in the locker room. What do you make of this report, John, coming from a very credible journalist who works for a very credible newspaper?
Yeah, I think, the players will say the things that are right. In other words, of course, he'll say that he wants to honor his contract with Real Madrid, because it's harder for you to say that I want to leave, I want to go somewhere else, I don't want to be here. We're talking about Real Madrid. So I don't think too much of what Hazard said in the paper. It would be great if Eden Hazard comes here. I mean, he was one of the best players in the world at one point. Yes, he's had 2 or 3 difficult years. I think he'll be extremely helpful if he comes in, because 32 years old is not that bad. He'll be able to give a couple of good years if he goes back into what he does. So the connection is there. It's certainly possible. It's certainly something that they've discussed, I'm sure. But for it to happen, it's really more up to Hazard than it is, I think, Real Madrid. If Hazard wants to get off his contract, I think Madrid is going to save $14 million, and they're going to take him out. It's more Hazard what he wants to decide and what he wants to do. And is Montreal going to break the bank to bring a guy like Hazard here? I think it's still a little bit risky because of the last 2 years that he's had, but there's no question that at one point or another, he was one of the best players in the world.
There's no doubt about that, John. It all depends on who the player is, I guess, and what they're made of, right? Because Divayo came much later than that. I think he was 35. So did Drogba. Divayo was great here. Drogba was excellent in the first season in which he came over. Yeah. It all depends what the mentality is, all right, John? If they want to come here to have fun and to be as a tourist, it's not going to work out. If they want to come here because they have something to prove to themselves and to the fans, that's something else.
Well, I think that's where Hazard is. I don't think he wants to kind of leave his legacy the way it is right now, because the last couple of years have been horrible. I mean, he's hardly played. He's been injured. He doesn't look like he's in shape. A lot of things have going on. So I don't think he would be the type of guy that would say that I want to leave or finish my career this way. I still think he needs to prove to himself and to others that he's going to finish in a better manner than it is right now. So I would think he would want to come here and still prove himself, or be anywhere to prove himself. The only problem playing in Real Madrid is he really going to get a chance to prove himself back there anyway. And maybe, you never know, maybe Madrid will push for him to leave and join another club. And if he comes here, I think it would be crazy for him not to give 100%, because like I said before, we all have pride, and he needs to show that his end of his career is going to be something like the middle of his career, which was superb.
John, in ending, and thank you so much for taking your entire lunchtime to do this podcast with me today, the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. You know I appreciate it. I'll ask you this. 12 games in, they are, CF Montreal is 1 point out of a playoff spot. Mind you, they have a game in hand on Charlotte, D.C., and New York City, who occupy the 7th, 8th, and 9th spot in the East. Do you think CF Montreal will make the playoffs this year?
They'll be around there. I wouldn't be surprised if they go in as the last place team or the one before that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just missed out. I think they're going to play around there. Again, if they're able to have everybody together and everybody's healthy, which is hard to do, yes, they're better. When they're missing players, they're not as good. But at the same time, if they don't perform at the best that they can, it's going to be difficult. So I think they'll be around there. I can't say if they're going to be in or out, but they're going to be around that area, what it shows at the moment.
It took a while to get him on the Sick Podcast. No shortage of efforts on our part. We called, we emailed, we texted, we contacted his agent. The negotiations were tough, but we were finally able to pull it off with John Limniatis. John, that agent of yours, let me tell you, he's not easy.
Missing lunch is very big.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for doing this, John.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a
We
good day.
appreciate it. All right, there you have it. Former Montreal Impact player and a former Montreal Impact coach, now technical director with Lac St. Louis Soccer Region, John Limniatis. That's it for me. We'll be back in a couple of days. Follow our Twitter account, SickPod CFMTL, and follow our YouTube channel. Subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thanks for watching Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.